Kaseda, thank you for your remarks and always supporting us. Gertrude Shope, who I'm sure is following our deliberations, all panelists and guests joining us today. I'm really, really thrilled to have the opportunity to greet you and welcome you all to this, the Gertrude Shope Annual Dialogue Forum, and perhaps most importantly, to wish you a happy International Women's Day. Our department decided to host this important forum today to coincide with Women's Day, as we thought we have much to reflect on as we try to assess where we are in this important task of building peace and security on our continent and worldwide. I wish to thank most sincerely our partners in this forum, especially the government of the Kingdom of Norway, as well as the people of Norway, for their always consistent support to South Africa and to the African Union Office of the Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security. We note with great pain the suffering and struggle of the women of Afghanistan and women in many areas that have experienced serious conflict throughout the world. I believe, though, that more should be done by us to critically examine the underlying causes of conflict and violence, as well as the role of great powers in entrenching conflict and division in many countries worldwide. We don't often look at this, but the proliferation of arms in the Sahel don't come from African leaders. They come from external forces that were involved in fueling conflict in Libya. We need to examine all of this critically, and I think we don't talk about this enough. We need more global honesty. You could see when the Afghan government forces were confronted by Taliban, that even after long training, they were totally untrained and had weapons which could hardly fire a bullet. How do you have a security force that can't respond to force after many years of occupation? So let us also, in seeking to achieve peace and security, be honest about where conflict comes from, because it is only through that critical examination that we will find the path to peace and security. But if we are dishonest in our analysis, we will never identify the problem and solve it. And I think we need to do so. We are living today in a world in which we are fortunate to have such an incredible list of women leaders, many of whom are going to be part of our forum. They have made an indelible contribution to the pursuit of peace on our continent and really make us proud to be associated with them. Many of the women who are going to participate in this forum have really done incredible work that all of us must admire and celebrate. Many of those who will speak are women that I've had the honor to work closely with. They are women that I admire. They are women who are committed to intellectual scrutiny, to human endeavor, and to the advancement and achievement of the gender agenda in the world. The patron of our forum, for example, Gertrude Shope, has spent her life confronting and responding to the critical question of how we achieve gender equality. During her time in the liberation struggle, along with many phenomenal women, she continued with the work begun by pioneers such as Charlotte Maxeke, such as the women of 8th March 1857. She fought against the triple oppression of women, the oppression based on race, on gender, and class. The name Gertrude Shope belongs to a rare breed of women whose impact on the political progress of our country is yet to be fully appreciated. In seeking to contribute to implementing the Women, Peace and Security agenda, our department initiated the Gertrude Shope Annual Dialogue Forum, as Ambassador Roma has said, in August 2015. Since the inception of the forum, it has addressed numerous disadvantages women experience and reflected on how to implement policies to resolve these challenges, such as greater public representation and greater equality in society. The forum has remained at the forefront of finding solutions to ensure the advancement of the Women, Peace and Security agenda in a very concrete and deliberate fashion. The implementation of the Women, Peace and Security commitments, as Ms. Miller has said, remains slow. However, we do need to continue to address the agenda and to find ways of working together to successfully implement it. The theme of our forum this year is exciting: the current state of global peace and security architecture and looking at utilizing existing capacity of peace institutions. We would like, through these discussions, to ensure that we have strategies to ensure that existing peace and security structures renew their commitments within institutions and that we fully utilize their capacity to ensure that women do become significant stakeholders in peace processes which impact them directly or indirectly. We're all very privileged and honored as South Africa to have played a role in trying to secure peace between the Federal Republic of Ethiopia and the TPLF. But we were bemused and rather discomforted in that the two delegations came to Pretoria without women as part of each of the delegations. And being South Africans, we pointed out this gap to them. The next day I saw that one or two women from somewhere appeared, but it was clear that our friends had not seen women as a core part of the negotiating teams that would discuss peace, despite the established and known impact of conflict on women. Part of the agenda of women, peace and security is to get everyone to understand that women are affected deeply by conflict and must always be part of post-conflict resolution and reconstruction. This is critically important and we need to communicate it more robustly. In fact, I'm very clear that if we're ever asked to host any peace talks in the future, we will refuse until we know the composition of the delegations. Because it was quite embarrassing. It was quite embarrassing that we talk about the inclusion of women and then because, we had to find peace, we couldn't say, no, sorry, stop, go back, go and get women and come back. We had to get on with the negotiations, but it's something we're not going to accept in the future, as long as I'm in this chair anyway. So today, we are living in a very troubling moment in terms of global security. And the role that the women play in promoting global peace and security and in sustaining it is quickly deteriorating. I see less and less reference to Resolution 1325 in the last year. And I am worried that there's a diminished understanding of this aspect. And what we do know is today, military spending has reached an all-time high of US dollars 2.1 trillion this year. What does that say for you? Link to it the fact that funding for women's organizations in conflict-affected countries is steadily shrinking day by day. We also are seeing fewer women participating in peace negotiations. According to UN reports, around 19% participation was seen in UN-led processes, down from 23%, which was achieved in 2020. But we all know from evidence that peace agreements are more sustainable when women are at the table, yet the number negotiating is declining. We need to have a very, very serious discussion on how we reverse this trend. And I think what we should do is those structures, countries, and institutions which provide resources for negotiations processes, they must say no resources till we know the composition. And the countries are well known, which are peacemaker countries: Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, Ireland. These play a leading role in funding peace processes. So they should lay down criteria that unless there's gender equality in the team of negotiators, we will not be able to provide support. It is only in this way of intervention that you really would achieve change. If you don't do that, things just go on as we know them to be. Now, the intersecting crises that we're seeing of rising conflict, very serious global health challenges, especially in public health care, as well as the impacts of climate change, all of these are threatening global well-being. And they are intersecting in a very worrying fashion. The global regression on women's rights has been coupled with heightened violence against women human rights defenders, including those involved in UN peace and security processes. We've seen in many parts of the world where there's conflict, women journalists are being harmed, women leaders of civil society organizations, women in filmmaking. So all women who are in positions where they can make the evil of conflict public become targets of the purveyors of violence. And we need to be talking much more about protection of such women. I always ask myself, if Shireen Abu Akleh had been a European woman, what would we be saying today about her murder? I wonder. So it is a challenge to all of us that we must address all those women who serve as defenders of human rights. Since 2018, more than a third of briefers at the UN Security Council have been subjected to reprisals and intimidation. So women appear and give evidence at the UN Security Council. When they get back to their place of origin, they're arrested, imprisoned, tortured, placed under scrutiny, and really made to suffer for being a presenter in the UN Security Councils. In his 2022 report on women, peace and security, the UN Secretary General reflected on the urgency of women's full and equal participation in peace and security processes around the world. He stated that women's participation is about more than gender equality. It is about revolutionizing peace building. It's about creating solutions that reflect the needs of all people in conflict-affected settings. And it's also about addressing the underlying conditions that drive conflict in the first place. He added it is about dismantling systems that permit and promote violence so that we can move toward a new era of lasting global peace and security. In conflict-affected areas around the world, women peace builders are already working toward the goals the Secretary General referred to. They do so often without institutional support and always at great personal risk. And yet they continue to advocate, mediate, and negotiate for a better future. Against an increasing backdrop of violent conflicts and reversal of generational gains in women's rights, the UN Secretary General's report showed that the Women, Peace and Security agenda is really taking a back line and that its goals are perhaps less plausible in terms of achievement than they've ever been before. He pointed out that the sharp deterioration in peace and security globally is causing immense suffering and has a significant and specific impact on women and girls in conflict-affected countries. The Secretary General's report was tabled on the sidelines of the annual Security Council open debate on WPS, which focused on women's resilience and leadership as a means of creating peace in regions plagued by armed groups. During that briefing, the UN Women Executive Director, Ms. Bahu, stated, at a time of unprecedented and intersecting crises, the last thing the world should do is walk back from its commitments on women, peace, and security. Women are entitled to our best efforts for their protection in crisis. More importantly, we are all entitled to the dividends of women's full involvement in achieving peace. The Secretary General's report, she continued, makes clear what needs to be done. Protect and empower women human rights defenders, ensure women's seat in political talks and in peace talks, and fund women's involvement in peace and security. There is no better test of our commitment to peace than the extent to which we ensure that women are at the heart of its pursuit, she concluded. In many countries, violent extremist groups and military actors have taken power by force and have revoked commitments on gender equality and are persecuting women for speaking up or for simply being female, as Ms. Miller has shown. One of the most extreme expressions of the regression of women's and girls' rights is seen in Afghanistan. Since 15 August 2021, women and girls in Afghanistan have been suffering systematic violations of their rights, directly resulting from the willful adoption of measures and policies by the Taliban, aiming at erasing them completely from all spheres of public life. The Taliban have closed girls' secondary schools, banned women from showing their faces in public, and restricted their right to leave their own homes. This is all extremely serious, and we as women need to speak up about it. Of course, many people who comment about my statements are going to be very happy I've mentioned Afghanistan, because they all complain that I only talk about Palestine or something else. So here I put the issue before you. And if I speak of the women in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in Chad, in Libya, in Tigray, I am speaking of the women in Afghanistan. Absence of a reference to a country or a region does not mean recognition, lack of recognition of their struggle. All women's struggles are worthy of attention wherever they occur. Women on the ground in Afghanistan have expressed deep concern for the end of schooling for girls, which they say has major negative effects on the economy, and on social development, among other spheres. Recently, the Taliban expressed interest to me of visiting South Africa to study our democracy. I advised them to begin practicing democracy first, then they could visit. The short and long-term costs of these reversals of women's rights are tremendous. The suicide rates among women have reportedly increased. Mortality rates, including maternal mortality, are expected to rise. And overall economic losses as a result of the erosion of women's employment are estimated to rise up to around $1 billion US. So this is very, very worrying. You're going to have a panel in this forum which is themed Global Solidarity and Accountability. It is clear from all our remarks that now more than ever, we need to show our solidarity with the women of the world in a tangible way. And we must insist on accountability for what is happening from the Taliban government and all governments that oppress women. Now, oppression is a terrible thing, but also taking sides is a terrible thing. We saw recently during the earthquake that occurred in Turkey and Syria that all of us were referring to Turkey and very few to Syria. And we're following a particular media narrative that seeks to advance one global perspective and not another. These are errors we should refuse to commit because all human beings matter, as President Nelson Mandela tried to teach us. You don't matter because of your color. You don't matter because of your location. You matter because you are human. This is the essence of South Africa's Ubuntu, and it's an essence all of us must appropriate. And we should never have the fault of seeing suffering in one country as being worthy of recognition in contrast to suffering of human beings in another country. I think the world is really at a shocking space, and we need to ask ourselves some hard question about whether we really treat all human beings equally as persons. I think as part of this global solidarity and accountability, it's vital that we emerge from the forum with clear recommendations on how our WPS agenda can support women who find themselves in such deeply vulnerable and troubling situations. I'm glad that the Gertrude Shope Women Mediators Network has made an immense contribution to drawing women in vulnerable communities together. We're especially pleased with the initiative of the Mediators Network because it has shown how empowered women can act in supporting the restoration of peace and stability and in supporting women living in such terrible conditions. One of the valuable lessons from the experience of the Gertrude Shope Women Mediators Network is that you do not only build peace because there is war, you build peace by investing in peace infrastructure that can sustain you during times of crises. We need to explore as this collective whether the Mediators Network can be given greater capacity to work on the ground in support of women beyond the shores of Africa, and whether funds for such global work can be leveraged. I think this is a question this forum could look at more directly, because I think African women in particular can play a very important global role, supported with the appropriate capacity. Allow me to conclude by thanking all of the partners that support the Gertrude Shope Dialogues and women everywhere for their support and immense contribution to what I regard as a very critical program. I believe this forum, led by various individuals who work really hard in the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. I believe it's doing incredible work, and I think we need to work toward building it from strength to strength and ensuring that it develops a presence throughout the global community in support of women who need the solidarity of our international activism. I thank you very much for listening to me, and I wish you a successful forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. I think the message, which is very clear to all of us, is that we need to show solidarity to all women of the world, because all human beings matter. Thank you very much, Madam Minister. Thank you very much, all the panel members. At this point in time, if my minister allows, we can have tea, let's say, for 15 minutes to come back to the panel discussions. Thank you very much to everybody. The tea is outside.